There's a sky in the east, over pyramids at Giza, where there once lived a girl. She ruled the world. Then down the Nile, he came with a smile. He was the king, she was the queen under the moonlight. Your eyes won't believe what your mind can conceive. Nights over Egypt. Nights over Egypt. Nights over Egypt. Incense and myrrh and girls that swirl to the music. Nights over Egypt. Women bear a heat where veils to be seen by no one. Take a caravan across the Sudan. Sahara beside is just a mirage. Oasis in the sand where life once began under the moonlight. Your eyes won't believe what your mind can conceive. Nights over Egypt. Nights over Egypt. Nights over Egypt.
Testing, testing. Hello, hello, hello. Let's see. Testing. Okay, cool, this works. Wonderful, wonderful. Alright. Let me fade this music out and let's just get this show on the road. Let's see if that works. That should be fun. Alright, cool. I'm actually going to be switching this away from the landscape only view really quickly. And that should do the trick. Cool. Okay, cool. So this time around, I'm going to be paying a lot more attention to the chat. Um, so please feel free to continually ask questions or engage in some dialogue with me right now. But the main reason for this stream in particular was basically to open up a little bit of the process around how we're performing a little bit of design QA, which means quality assurance, in the general system that is landscape. So this won't be anything exciting. We're not going to be going over deeply what's the word? Deeply like conceptual sort of realms of discussion when it comes to urbit or landscape or design. This will be a little bit more sort of chill, and you'll just get a sense of some of the nitty gritty of how we're just continuing to improve this whole project. Basically, I have gotten a lot of questions before as to like how the design is generally approached, or how it's segmented, or how things are generally shipped at the rate that they are. And I'm hoping that this gives a little bit of insight into just how some of this is performed, and maybe even inspires some of you all who are watching to jump into the realm and help us out a little bit when it comes to some of this design QA. So I'm actually going to flip away from the video, which is looking super trippy at this point, and I'll just get into some of the tickets that I've been looking at right now. So basically the way that I'm typically rounded up into discussion about landscape design updates is via GitHub, of course. It's kind of the go-to development platform. It's where a lot of things like issues are literally surfaced up as GitHub issues, which should be familiar to most of you. But for people who aren't familiar with GitHub, we basically have this area that we're building out landscape in, or at least will be very soon. And GitHub issues are basically just a way of, as Somlus here is sort of bringing up an issue, it's a way where you can kind of like type up a little bit of a description of something that you've observed is incorrect or wrong, or just not done in a nice way on Urbit. And that way we can go ahead and assign developers, designers to it. I typically get mentioned on a lot of these, so I can give them a look. You can generally see here just a timeline of the process. So here, Matilda has assigned one of our developers to address some of the issues that Somlus is bringing up, such as this issue, which is a pretty good one. It should have been put in quite a long time ago, but we basically made it in groups such that you can just click a delete button and the group will just vanish immediately, and it'll just be destroyed irrevocably. So of course that's not really good. We really have no way to undo that action, and so it's a good thing to make sure that people actually do mean what they say, in that they want to go ahead and delete their group. Or to be more accurate to how we will be implementing this soon, how one might want to go ahead and archive a group, because I'll get into that in a little bit, but this is basically what this whole issue has been written up about. It's assigned a priority, a developer typically, and anytime this is something that we need to basically build into a process a little bit stronger, but ideally we would have it such that it's really obvious which designers to call into the mix, depending on what the nature of the actual issue is. So right now this is this was basically identified as an Indigo component sort of issue, as Tyler here brought up pretty accurately, and Gavin, who is our designer leading this sort of Indigo building process, would be the one to basically say, hey, yeah, sure, this is the component that we would use if we were to go ahead and patch this up. So I wanted to start off with this issue because it's just a great example of this kind of micro ecosystem of just how issues are brought up, how they're bucketed into different priorities, assigned developers, and then eventually the point of probably most importance to this stream is when a designer gets brought up into it. For those of you who don't know, right now at Tlon there are 3 designers total on the entire team. So that is myself. We have Jimmy, who I've streamed with before. He's been the other host of this stream in the past streams. Then we have Gavin here, as I mentioned, who is working on Indigo and a lot of other things. So we share a lot of responsibility between the 3 of us, and typically we're all working in our own sort of little vertical or our own realms of design work, but there's obviously a lot of like cross-cutting issues. Indigo being one of them. Indigo is the design system of landscape, and so anytime we would want to write up an issue that involves any sort of the expression of a component or a componentized interface or something that should be componentized, he's usually the person to reach out to. But that's getting a little bit too deep into this. I wasn't actually going to necessarily respond to this or address it because this is something that should get handled in the context of Indigo. But it's a great example. Another example of some of this work that's getting worked on is something that does involve a little bit more of a sort of generative design observation or an actual feature that has yet to exist that should exist. So for two of our modules, chat and links, which I can show in just a minute, something that we're exploring is the ability to just drag and drop images directly into the client. So I can hop into landscape for just a bit. For those of you who are familiar with landscape as it exists now, we basically have this computer environment that's really simple right now, and it uses a relatively simple metaphor. It's a home screen, it's a box full of other more smaller boxes, which we are calling modules. And each of these modules effectively ensconce one sort of main sort of like computer utility is a good way to put it. It's like here, in chat, obviously that's our messaging module. Publish is something that we're using very lightly for like writing, publishing, and having people comment on published posts. And then we have links here, which is undergoing a bit of an interesting evolution. For those of you who have seen previous streams, this is what we hope to basically grow into this thing that we're calling collections. And the idea is for collections to represent something that is a little bit more akin to, well, right now you can see that links are really just a sort of link aggregator of sorts. We can post links. If it's a YouTube, you can go ahead and automatically link to the YouTube. Or if you were just to open up the comments here, I could just watch it here, comment on how cool of a video this is. But the idea is to make this into a little bit more of a generalized format for the near future. So that's links. It's very simple. Then we have these other utilities that are just for purposes of viewing, like weather and the clock to show when the sunrise is. And then of course we have Dojo, which is our command line. This is where you could like input scripts, get some things back. You could perform sort of light REPL-like activity here, but that's all still not exactly what we're going to be going over today. So with respect to the issue that I just mentioned, for chat and links, something that we're exploring is the ability to drag and drop images into S3, which is the mechanism that we're basically using to handle image hosting on Urbit right now. The best way for me to sort of demonstrate that is that right now, whenever I'm placing a new link into links, it's a little bit manual right now. I actually have to paste a link, I have to enter its title, and then I post it, and it becomes one of these items that we see here. Obviously, for the near future, in the evolution from links to collections, we would possibly like to see a means by which one could post an image here and have people comment on it. Video is the sort of other obvious one which we already somewhat afford for with YouTube, but it would be great if I had a recording of an interface, for example, on my computer. I could upload it here very quickly just by dragging it from my desktop into Landscape itself. So, I just blinked for a second. Yeah, so right now I just demonstrated the sort of manual nature of this right now. This gets a little bit better if we were to go to chat. Let's see, what would be a good chat to go to? Probably just general is a good one. So going into general in Urbit community, we'll note that we also have this little image uploading icon to the right over here. If I were to go ahead and grab an image really quickly from the internet, let's see if I can hop over to Arena and grab a really quick one. That's pretty cool. Let's see, any one of these would be great. Perennial rice. So you all are probably familiar with how I can get an image, drag it to my desktop. It's now mine. It's now local. Something that we basically have integrated S3 to do very, very quickly is to... Actually, I'll test this in a little bit more of a random channel. Let's see. Actually, general should be fine. Everyone should be okay with that. The idea here is that we basically have built the integration such that I can click on this thing, I've already set up S3 in the background, so we don't have to get into that. And I can basically upload the image, which hits S3, is stored there, and is pasted as a link right here in chat. And so you can see here, obviously, we have this form, and it would be great to be able to drag and drop images into it, or links, or any number of things. So in this extended example, what's being risen up is this idea that for chat and links, we would like to drag and drop images, have them get processed by S3, made into a link, and then placed into either of the module contexts that I just described. As this is currently defined, there's no description. This was written as basically a very self-explanatory sort of feature request that we'd like to get into the next sprint. And the way in which this is proceeded is, I believe Tyler has been the one who has been working in getting some of these integrations set into place. Thank you, Tyler, for your assistance and help. It is wonderful. And we can see here that there's a couple of other references in play. And this is one of those issues in which I had been made known to it based on the issue that it was previously referencing. And so I went ahead and basically dropped in some designs that had already been in the works. Links has been in a little bit of an evolution for quite a while, and so there has been a general idea since the beginning for how to get it to a state where it would be a little bit more ideal of a place to use to share links, basically. So you can see here this screenshot that I took. It's very lightly annotated. I just took a screenshot directly from Figma. It went to my desktop and I just dragged it over here. And basically we have here this sort of 5-step state that I was trying to illustrate, where we basically have the notion of the editable field, which can be clicked into to immediately begin typing, or I could paste a link into there very quickly, but also we want to afford for some natural means of just uploading files. And so we take this idea, which is to have this be the editable field and an uploadable file sort of initializer. In an ideal state, for the second sort of state, we would like means by which we can enter a link and have its title element in HTML, like the actual title element, be actually referenced here, so it's automatically titled, and then I could post the link. Or in the default case, if we can't, for whatever reason, fetch the title link, I can go ahead and paste a link, nothing happens, and I can just go ahead and type out its title in the worst case. If this thing is ready to post, obviously this previously gray little button turns green, signaling its readiness to post, and then of course we would have the actual active posting state. I went into a little bit of a description here as to what I meant with respect to auto-generated titles. There was a little bit of an exchange here about OEmbed and how that could work. And it looks like Fang here. I'm not sure if I should continue to dox him, but I'm sure many of you know who he is on Urbit. We have active conversation happening now, so this is great. You can all see how this is kind of a living document of changes that are happening. One of the questions that I still have yet to actually answer that would generally be a part of this QA process that I'm beginning to describe here is how questions are obviously fielded or answered, or asked, I should say. The hover state is something that I had not yet gotten into designing, because it's basically afforded for really no hover states at all, other than maybe the small little Mickey Mouse glove that you get when you're hovering over an image or any clickable element, but it's something worth thinking about. And it's one of those things where I should respond to Tyler sooner than later that it's something that I will get a look at, but right now the hover state isn't necessarily differentiated from the states that have been illustrated here at the moment. So this is an existing sort of item. This gives you a sense of some QA that is actually actively happening right this moment, and I'm just kind of walking you through a bit of the thought process that I personally engage in as I go through these. So this is actually something that I'm just going to be pinning in Chrome so I can revisit it later. There are some other elements here, or other issues that are elemental to this process that I'd like to bring up. We have this other example of a very short feature request that's been set to priority 3. I believe that is the lower priority that we have. I wish these actually had descriptions. I think that's something that GitHub doesn't afford for yet. But the idea is to basically get the ability to leap into specific posts or notes by entering their title into the product at some point. So this is one of those things that I have basically brought myself into the fold of. It's something that basically extends the existing Leap interface, so this actually wouldn't require a whole lot of design work on my end, but it's one of those things that I'm basically using the tabs in Chrome as a bit of a checkbox. Eventually I will get to that sometime this evening. But the idea is to basically append a working design to show how we might surface up the ability to do this very soon. Lastly, in terms of examples, before I get into actual more boring QA, I'll play some music and just talk to y'all in YouTube. The last example that I want to offer up here is obviously more involved, ongoing sort of project that's actually happening right now. The idea here is that this already has some developers who are working on implementing this feature. So in this case, this is migrating the links module that I just went over into this new structure that we have, GraphStar, which is this really exciting new front-end infrastructure that will allow us to build highly networked graph-like structures and their related interfaces very quickly. So we have two developers here who are working on this right now. They've already been actively involved in discussing how this is all going down. And a question that I had a couple days ago from Matilda is that there was a previous issue for archiving a group archiving like a kind of channel within a group. And one of the questions that I had is, hey, this had been closed. And I saw that at the end of that issue, it was referencing this issue that I'm currently now writing in. And I was basically asking that if I have designs for archival related interfaces, should they just go in here? And Matilda answered yes. And I let her know that I will be updating the ticket soon. So as a part of that whole process, generally something that I would be doing is, for some of the smaller tickets, like the one that I just illustrated, this is a design that has been mostly finished. I'll basically just be hopping over to the working file that we have for OS2. It's quite expansive right now, but we're working on reorganizing a lot of this to make them a little bit saner. The idea is that there is existing work that has been going on for generally reconfiguring groups and figuring out how settings work across different contexts. And one of the things in which we've already done a little bit due diligence in actually describing is for group settings, how one might actually go about archiving a group. So right now, we see the way that I've very roughly designed it here is that we have a new section in what could be considered the settings of a group, where I can set its avatar, I can set its name, its description, its visibility, which will be a very interesting thing we'll be exploring in the near future. And we, of course, want to be able to possibly export a group, and maybe just a flat text list of maybe the membership of it, the list of channels and their associated metadata, and anything that might help in having that group information basically be ready for importing at any time, in the case that one has breached, as is a great example. But this feature right here is this very, very hastily, and because it was hasty, it was very largely written, was this idea of archiving a group. So this isn't so much a very heavy design, really. This is just the implementation of one of the Indigo components, which is just a basic button and field label and description into the context that is the group's settings. So we would want to be able to basically hop over to my group. If I'm saying, hey, we're shutting down this reading group, I could very simply, as an admin of a group, hop over to the settings, archive the group, and that would effectively archive the entire group for everyone inside. So this kind of brings to bear this really interesting detail about Urbit, which is that because this is a P2P computer and network, any sort of information that your ship has seen, or Urbit node in this case might be another way of explaining it, any bit of data that your ship has seen is always going to be yours. There's no way anyone else who's external to you can take that away from you. So even in the case of being banned from a group, or being a member of a group that is then archived, the idea is that one does have access to all the data that you had seen before. So if you were active in a group for 5 years and you had all that information and all that memory related to the group, and it was shuttered very, very quickly for whatever reason, you would have all the data that you had ever seen that was associated with that group, which is great for a variety of reasons. I'm sure there are many of you who are watching right now that have been in the position where, for whatever reason, a group that you were on in the internet had been disbanded. All the data was irrevocably just kind of tossed to the winds, and the server was shut down. And you basically have no record or no ability to revisit any of the memories that you had made in that group. Luckily, that's something that we have emerging out of this interface, just just natively. This already exists. So one of the ways in which I would actually go about basically adding this design sort of thought in and the respective interfaces into the issue that I mentioned before is by basically taking a screenshot of this existing work. This is something that I'm going to very, very explicitly mention is sort of a rough pass of UX copy, and is something that I will actively hone in the coming days for this feature. But that just so that we have a bit of a placeholder, this is a way for me to say, hey, we have an idea of how this thing should initially at least be placed. So this is an example of basically the most surface level interface to bear, which is that when I want to archive a group, how do I go about doing that? And the idea is that we now have this thing that one can be pointed to in order to actually archive a group. But as I mentioned before, for someone on the receiving end of an archival, you want to be able to be tuned into the fact that the group that you are a part of has been archived. So there is that sort of other realm of user that I think will be still affected by this change. And so in order to afford for that, in some of the new groups designs, which for those of you who haven't seen them, we're working on doing a relatively large overhaul of just the way that groups are interacted with. The idea is to basically provide a very obvious banner for anyone who is a member of an archived group that, hey, this group has been archived. You can no longer interact with its materials. This is still a little bit of a minimal pass. For someone who is new to Urbit or someone who has never been a part of an archived channel, there are a lot of implied sort of changes that have been made here. For example, none of these channels would then be posted to or be able to be posted to ever again. They'd be locked effectively. And you wouldn't be able to interact with anyone in the group anymore because it's archived. We will be eventually affording for a means of possibly forking a group, but that's a little bit of an external discussion here. The thing to make note of is that, of course, this will require a bit. The issue that I was referencing earlier will basically need to afford for the ability to mirror this sort of state for the user on the receiving end of an archive. In a sort of related manner, another feature that I might want to point to, let's see, is this sort of proposal for a means of visually indicating in the context of a chat whether or not the channel or chat is, or any general channel. Chat is just one of them. It could have been a link channel, as I had mentioned and demonstrated before. And the idea is that we want to make it very clear that the channel itself is also, it has been locked down. And so there's been this proposal for basically taking these bookending interfaces, the chat input and any of the chat meta information, inserting a sort of new block on top of the bottom information, which mentions quite plainly that the channel has been disconnected. The host appears to be offline. You can still search browse previously received history. I might want to change up that copy to make it a little bit more obvious that this is relating to archival because it exists in an archived group. And of course, we want to make it very clear that the actual message sending is locked, possibly not even temporarily. So we can already see here that as I'm walking this through with everyone, there are still some copy changes that need to be made here. But directionally, this is something that would be good to basically illustrate the issue sooner than later, so that the idea for how this should eventually make it out to people to be used is made evident as early as possible. So again, I actually might edit this copy very quickly live, so please excuse me while I type very slowly and clumsily here. But yeah, this is just giving you a little bit of a insight into how I might be approaching the response to an issue that had been already recorded by someone. Locked. This group is archived. Still a little bit of a placeholder tier sort of writing, but it's still good to exhibit the intent. Let's see. Yeah, we could probably replace this entire thing by just saying the group, this channel, was located in has been archived. You can still browse receive history, learn more. This might be a thing we'd always want to offer up for people so that they could click into that and possibly go to a documentation on why this has happened or what archiving even means. So in this case, I would again, for the third time, take a picture of this interface. I now have the interfaces that I would like to basically respond to this ticket with, And I can now reply in turn to the general ticket and its need for maybe illustrating the sort of design interfaces associated with this. So again, I'll take a little bit of a minute to respond to this. This is actually something I have really needed to do. And I'll actually look at the YouTube to chat with anyone who's been asking any questions. Oh, wow. Let's see. That's good. Hover states are not needed. Pointer cursor sufficient. By the way, if 100 ships can produce a decentralized system, does following 100 e-girls on TikTok equate to decentralized? Yeah, GF. Possibly. I see. This makes a lot of sense, Tyler. Yeah. This actually makes sense. Yeah, that is a really good point. The actual editing of the chat inputs and the link inputs really will require something that says, hey, possibly as you're dragging a file, drop the file in here to upload it. So that is a great point, and I'm actually going to make a note of the existing design that is something that I need to afford for. So I'm glad you clarified there. I think I have this in posts right now. Just kind of, let's see, where might I have placed this? There we go. Drag and drop state. So that should be a little bit of a note enough for me. Okay. That was a great call. Thanks for that. All right. So as I was getting into, no other questions it looks like. I'll just bump up the music as I'm writing just so there's something to listen to. But yeah, please feel free to ask more questions. And after this, after writing this issue or responding to it, I'll get a little bit more into some actual QA, which is me clicking around landscape and trying to figure out any issues that are going on with it. So let's see, what would be a good thing to play? This might be a fun one. I should still be able to talk over this, I believe. So if I speak out loud, I should still be able to communicate. Let's see. Stack. So luckily for GitHub, writing this is all relatively straightforward. You can drag and drop images right into it. These are just the screenshots I just took. And what I'm doing is just explaining each one of these in a relatively straightforward way. Cool. It's a little bit of a long one in terms of issues, but I think it generally gets my intent across, which is kind of the main point here. Obviously, if I'm missing any details, or if any of these seem totally, for whatever reason, incorrect, I'd just hash out any of the details in the context of this issue. But I think this gets across, the majority of what needs to be basically signaled here, is really all I'm saying in this whole thing. So that was a possibly uneventful exhibition of just how I sort of how I basically interact with one of these issues that I get mentioned on or signaled on to any degree, or I typically try to find myself exploring the issues that are being made as often as I can, at least once a day, just to see how things are generally progressing and to comment as needed. So that one's in a state of being answered. I probably should respond to this one eventually, but I'd like to basically just get into actual QA. Let's see. No questions at the moment, it seems. Cool, that's fine. Let's see what the levels are like. Cool. It seems like the music should be quiet right now. It's actually hard. I can't tell if the levels are correct. So if I'm unintelligible or unable to be listened to with the music, or if you can't even hear the music, just let me know in the chat. So yeah, let's see. Actually, let me lower this really quickly while I just get into this next segment. So basically, the next thing really is to just perform normal QA. Normal as in just sort of the daily QA or weekly QA that should just be happening, where we just kind of poke around landscape, see if there are sort of any edges of it that need to be polished or fixed completely. And that's really relatively straightforward. As I walk through it, I'll try to make sort of what I'm actually doing obvious, but I'll be doing this for the next 30 minutes or so. And yeah, that's about it. If anyone has any questions or about this general process, please just let me know. One of the first things I think I'm going to be doing right now is basically just investigating the present state of Leap. I think with QA in general, a way that I've always liked to approach it is that we basically take this progression of interfaces in a little bit of an intentional manner. So rather than trying to find issues with the chat and then jumping over to Dojo and then jumping into Leaper groups, one of the things that I like to do is basically proceed even just top from bottom. Or if the interface for whatever reason was divided into 4 tabs, as you might see on a phone, I would want to progress from one tab to the next, to the next, to the next. So this gives a little bit of a spatial dimension to any sort of QA that you might be performing on Urbit, which is, I think, good. It helps sort of structure the actual structure of the QA process to begin with. So it helps for me in that I have a little bit of a knowledge as to how a lot of this will be evolving in the near future. So that's a good context to have as we get into this. But for those of you who do want to take on QA and perform it on your own whenever you have the time or whenever you notice something off, you might not have that foreknowledge, or you might explicitly not, but that's fine. It's regardless of whether or not you think an issue is small, like a small visual bug, or large, as in like a totally broken sort of experience or sort of UX component of landscape. It's good to report things at any level, really. That's just a point of emphasis I'd like to basically hold on this. So let's see. Things I'm seeing. Just overflow states are something that are also really good to look into. It's a lot of channelism a part of, obviously. A good example of something that a couple of days ago I may have reported in as a part of design QA, but it is actually being fixed, are basically these icons that you see here. Right now they are tiny, very hard to read in terms of their legibility, and we actually have a new set that are getting shipped as a part of Indigo. And this is an issue that I was close to making, where it's like, hey, these were on the module tiles themselves and they don't really belong here at this size, but this is actually being fixed in a relatively near-term integration of Indigo into landscape. So this is one of those examples of a small issue which, had I been external to Tlon, I probably would have just made, regardless of its how small it is, as a bit of feedback. But yeah, anytime you see a link or an icon that's just illegible, I highly recommend you submit that in as a bit of QA sort of feedback. So, I'm not noticing anything. Another big point of QA also is performing tests with respect to responsiveness. Right now, luckily, this is all been engineered in a good way, in the sense that we do have responsive qualities being actually registered here. There's a little bit of a visual sort of quirk here in that we have what is a long channel title, which is squishing the PAT-P, which is not ideal. This is one of those things that might inevitably become a little bit of a larger project, in the sense that we might want to sort of restructure Leap to make it afford for these things better, or even work on mobile in a little bit of a more of a pure sort of mobile implementation approach. But at this moment, I think that this is, given the state of flux that landscape is in, that this is something that is relatively small. I probably will record it, but it's one of those things where I would imagine it's probably low priority at the moment. So actually, even now, this would be good. Also, the other thing to note in this process that I'm undergoing is that for me, design QA is a highly visual practice. Taking screenshots is basically the language it's performed in. So it's a good note to make if you are interested in helping us out with QA here. Another small thing here that I'm noticing, it was not even maybe a misimplementation, but it possibly not been specified in the design, that right now we have a little bit of a like a visual sort of blur between the actual input here and the actual list that's being rendered underneath it. You can see here, if I'm at the top of this scroll, I do get a little bit of a border here that kind of demarcates the input from each of these sections. But it would actually be great as I scroll to keep a sort of visual demarcation there, so like a line basically. So something that I might want to record here is, I could take a screenshot very well here, but another example of some software that is actually good to know about if you do happen to be interested in just going all in on helping us with QA are screen capturing applications, which help you record your screen and make videos of it. macOS actually comes pre-built with something called QuickTime that is perfectly fine for this type of task, but this application that I'm using called Cap basically allows you to draw little boxes. So you can specify the size, hit record, it has a little bit of a delay on it. And so what I can be doing here, it doesn't record sound necessarily, so I kind of wiggle my mouse around to indicate that this is the thing I want someone to focus on, and then I would scroll down, and we would kind of get a little bit into that weirdness of not being able to see a line there, and I might wiggle my mouse again just for emphasis. And so while I won't be capturing my voice, what I could do is basically attach this to a ticket and then write out a small description of what I'm trying to illustrate here, which is generally what you would like to do. For Cap in particular, it can output to GIF, a variety of image formats. I would just leave this as a GIF because it's a very small thing to demonstrate, and I usually make the size quite a bit smaller so that it doesn't take forever to load. And this thing just goes to my my desktop. I'll name it for myself. And so that way, when I revisit my list of images that I'm compiling here on my desktop, I can get a little bit of a sense as to why I took it and what issue it would probably be slotted into. So I'll just quit out of Cap. So that's a great example of like a very minute bit of QA. It's still important though to get all the edges correct because we do want to ship something that is at the highest bar of quality, obviously. So yeah, taking a look at how things respond in responsive viewports is great. A great example of a realm of QA that, for me, again, I have a sort of pre-knowledge as to what we will be shipping soon. There's a whole host of issues with the groups interface that I think I've made public and I'm sure many people are aware of. And at this point, due to the fact that I know an entirely new groups interface is being shipped in the near future, I can basically just completely remove this from my sort of QA procedure. I can basically say, yeah, I can QA leap for a little bit in a pretty extensive manner, see if it basically responds to input and such in the way that I'd expect. But right now I can totally write groups off basically entirely. So that's another bit of context that's good to know. Another small thing that I just noticed as I was scrolling here is that we have a little bit of a this is something totally within the realm of just pure visual feedback, where like you can see here that we have this label here for the segmentation. You can get a little bit of a sense of its block, its DOM block, I should say. So this thing reaches all the way to the top and has a very abrupt sort of padding or margin at the very bottom. And you can see here when I hover over chat, we basically have these two things butted up right against each other. They look okay, when they're not highlighted, but you begin to notice this as you see these smaller demarcated zones for apps and commands, which they only make the most momentary of appearances, like when you're searching for chat or links, for example. But as we get into a new direction for Leap, which includes a default set of recommendations when you are in the default state, we want to make sure that each of those small sections are basically a little bit better spaced out. So in this example, the way that I might bring up this visual QA issue is by checking this out and basically preparing this to say that, hey, it would be great if we separated this out a little bit more, and then even include a design from Figma or something that actually illustrates visually the exact amount of spacing that I'd like to see here. So just all examples of some Leap QA that I think would be good to ship soon. There actually is a ticket for basically like a new version of Leap that's going out, and so this is all something that I would probably just attach to that existing ticket right now before we actually update it and send it out for the next OTA. At the moment though, Leap is it has like a shallow surface area, and so a lot of these visual things that I'm noticing, they're small and not that plentiful. So I think that's it for Leap. Let's see, what would be another one good one to get into? I think one of the things that I personally have been noticing I've been wanting to see a lot more improvement on in general is Publish. Publish is one of those apps that I think could get really, really good in the future, and it really would be just sort of like QA that would really get it to the place that we need it to be, so you could use it as a very regular writing mechanism. So much earlier than before the stream, I set up a personal group so I could just do experiments inside of it. I called it MySpace, very tongue-in-cheek. And you can see here that I've been performing some test posts just so I can get a bit of a sense of how rendering happens inside of published documents. Actually just might as well start a new one because I forgot what I was trying to get at there. I was also performing some tests on how images are rendered here, and already I'm beginning to see some small things I'd like to see changed eventually. So we recently basically performed a bit of an update on this, on Publish I should say, where we now have Indigo components that are being shipped. So it's all great, it's a part of the design system, but one of the things that we did notice is that a couple of these forms are basically not what you would want to see in a default sort of a text editor. It's like right now this started off as almost a one-liner form, and when I'm writing I want to have a nice canvas that I can see when I write on. So an issue actually has already been submitted to basically expand the surface area of this form to the max height that is available in the viewport, but there are a couple of other things such as like this, for example, post cannot be blank. This is an affordance that we do see in Indigo for forms, like when I'm filling out my name and my email, but this isn't something you would necessarily want to see in a text editor, for example. It's not a form; it's a tool for writing. So this is actually something that I didn't really catch, but we might want to indicate possibly through the submit button that I can't publish this if there's nothing here, but I don't think that this is actually required for this form. So this is actually something that I didn't catch my first time around, and it would be good to make note of it. So I just took a screenshot of it, and again, this is going to my desktop, which is my nice little collection mechanism for any future QA issue writing that I will be doing. And right now I have a desktop cleaner, so it may look as though I only have a very few bits of QA that I've been recording, but I have a ridiculously massive stack of these that I just haven't been able to write against. So it's a little bit of insight into some of my process here. those three. Let's see. Actually, well, so that's a little bit. So that scrolling, for example, is something that you wouldn't want to see happen. It actually may have already been recorded. I'll have to do a double check. But yeah, I'm just testing out headers right now. And there it goes. So it's just a small quirk in the actual text editor implementation. So as you can see, QA is a little bit of a, it's not that exciting of a process, but it's so necessary. It's a lot of just kind of testing the edges of, the product. I just want to see if there is a header 7. Probably isn't. Yeah, it doesn't even render, which is good. I'll just post it anyways. Let's just keep it as focused as we can. This was actually brought up today. We have some really wacky header styles, and it would be good to basically normalize them against what you might want to expect inside of a writing application. Actually take the full thing here. And this is a thing where we actually do have an Indigo specification for this. It may not have been implemented yet. It may be awaiting implementation. But again, even though there is something that I have pre-knowledge of and I know we may have already solved this on the design front, this is still something that we might want to record in an issue just to have it for record's sake. So this is something that I actively recognize we possibly have a solve for, but I'm going to be writing an issue for this regardless, because I know that this is something that would be good to have on record. I think in the case of QA or even issue writing when it comes to software design or just the general software development process, this is kind of a point in case of a process in which, I don't know, I'm blanking on the actual saying, but the more the merrier. You know, it's not about the quality, it's about the quantity in this case, I think is what I was trying to say. It really is about capturing as many of these insights or issues as possible, regardless of how small they are. So this is like a very small test, but I think this actually gets to what exactly I wanted to demonstrate. So there you go, no comments. We actually might need to update this whole state in general. Like, in all cases, deletion should always go to the end of the settings. So this is like a tiny thing. This is actually a case where I might forget why I took this because it is such a general shot. You know, it's like, what am I trying to illustrate here? I think I would remember that I don't believe that delete should ever be the first option, but I do want to kind of visually indicate that this thing should always be at the end, just for myself, in case I do forget. So that's a nice little utility that's built into macOS. Here's my comment when enabled. It's like an interesting little disjoint, you know. If the comments are by default off, I probably wouldn't want to see that affordance for showing comments in a single one of these titles, or these entries, I should say. Yeah, I'll just take a note of that actually. Yeah. Those are one after the other, so I should be able to recognize what I was trying to get out there. But just for safety's, just so, you know, just so in case my future self isn't remembering, you know, I should probably make a note that these are a conjoined issue. Comments and publish, that should be enough to spark my memory. I'll quickly check into comments. There may have been some banter while I've been away. At all? Okay. I can bump that up then. It is a little soft right now. And I did do that on purpose, but I can bump it up a little bit more. Testing, testing. Maybe a little bit less. Should be fine. Any other feedback along those realms, just let me know. Let's actually see how I'm doing on time really quickly. I think I'll be giving this like 20 or so more minutes just to get a little bit more of a deeper sense into how QA is being performed right now. But I actually might write some of these as issues just so we get a complete sense of how this flow is actually enacted. So I'll actually use a couple of the ones that I observed and published as an example. Let me just figure this out. It's probably an issue in landscape. Landscape bug report. So one of the things to make note of is that when you go to one of our repositories and you go to our issues because you're interested in making an issue, performing some QA, you would basically do that by clicking on new issue right here. And we have a couple of templates that we make available for properly scoping and discussing and writing about a given issue. And in this case, we don't have something that is explicitly design oriented, although I may have actually, yeah, this is something that I submitted as an issue a little bit ago, but I'll get around to that later. Soon we might have a design issue template that's a little bit more clear as to how you would use it, but right now I'll just use the landscape bug report. Actually, I'll just use this template, but I probably won't use the actual template, which is not allowed. Don't do this all the time. Yeah, I'll just ignore this. And the way in which I would typically write this in terms of standardizing it is that I type in whatever module or feature area I'm interested in bringing to bear in QA. So in this case, I'm going to be bringing up one of the publish things that I just noticed. And the one that I will actually make note of is this one. This is a very clear and simple one to illustrate. Hey, I want to move this to the bottom because that's the way that delete should be. And so typically the way that I write these issues is that I'll kind of open up with this is what I've observed. I will give a bit of an example of the thing that I observed, and then what I would normally do is offer up a suggestion on how to fix the observed issue. So it kind of nicely breaks into a three-part structure there. So maybe I'll just prepend this with design QA. Publish setting. Publish settings. Delete. I think it's called delete notebook. So that, this gives a bit of a clear context into what I'm talking about here, what the actual QA issue is. And this is actually something I would maybe even say in a little bit more of a smaller way, even further summarized in the actual title itself. So I'd say here, publish settings, move delete notebook to the end of list or something. Can probably fix that later. Should be moved to end of settings list. Cool. So what I can say is the observed issue, observed issue. I just usually say outright if something's simple. This is a simple ask. Quality bump. Actually, I don't need to write that. This doesn't need a title. It's basically, let's move the delete. the image below. Yeah, even more straightforward. Let's see how to even say this. Whoa. What's going on here? Like archive. So as I mentioned before, I normally like to actually provide a design here, but because I used a red marker to make it very obvious what I'd like to see happen here, I will just add that in as like a final note. I'm going to use the red marker. And that's it, you know. Something I like to do is if there is a bit of a label, we actually have a priority system. And this, in the actual Urbit repository, we do have labels for every single section of landscape that we would like to address, but that isn't in this repository at the current moment. This is all new, and we're still kind of developing a little bit of a prioritization system around this, so I don't need to do that just yet. But this is it. This is a very simple issue. It's a very simple example of some QA that's very, very straightforward, and you kind of get a sense of how, in my mind, there's a sort of general best practice for addressing and structuring the actual item itself. So now I can submit it. It's very straightforward. There's probably some fixing and copy that I could do, but if anyone has any questions about what I'm trying to bring to attention here, they'll ask me and I'll respond in kind to the issue. So I have this issue that I will get back to later in terms of hover states. I'll check on comments for a bit. It looks like we can hear music now, which is good. And I'll continue any sort of general QA process in landscape. Maybe see if anyone's commenting in Urbit itself. See. Minutes ago. Live feedback on the drag and drop PR demo. We can check it out right now. So as a part of feedback in general or QA, sometimes people actually build out their proposals in terms of how they would like to see a design or a feature be implemented as an actual extension or addition to the actual code itself, which is always welcome if you can do it. Let's see. I'm imagining that this. Let's see. I wonder. Let's just see if there's another thing going on here. Oh, this is already merged. Okay. Oh, the question here actually, if you're still listening right now, Tyler, is what exact branch I should be pulling. I realize I've been doing a lot of these QA procedures in Landscape, which is not the current working repository in GitHub, but we will eventually be moving over to it. So we have a little bit of a process sort of mix here, but I believe that what I would be pointed to, I will check to see if he's actually answering me, but I would imagine that we would just be referencing Urbit itself and checking out any sort of PRs that have been pulled against it in recent times. There we go. This is the one he was probably talking to. Oh, and he made a video of it, so I actually don't have to pull anything. In GitHub, sometimes you have to pull branches, which for those of you who are not used to developing against version control, we basically have the main sort of timeline of how Urbit is being developed, what we're all interacting with whenever we pop over to landscape, but also you can basically branch that. You can make a fork in the road, an alternate reality, however you want to think of it. And in this case, Tyler created a branch or an alternate reality in which one can drag and drop things from one's desktop into landscape itself, which is awesome. I'm really glad that he's working on this. And so normally I would have to basically go into GitHub, perform a procedure in which I take what is the sort of main timeline of development and then replace it with Tyler's, so that I can basically get a look at what he's doing in like live, and I can click it into it and see how it's working. But he was nice enough and diligent enough to provide a video, which I can just check out on my own with having to do anything, which is super, super convenient. And for me, at least, this is very helpful to have. So we can get a sense of how he has implemented this here in a video, which we are watching live. Amazing. So he can grab the title. Oh, hell, yeah, he automatically got this all. Oh, this is wonderful. Yes. Okay. That is beautiful. Oh my god, that's so exciting. We need to get this into chat. So it automatically closed. I hope those of you who are watching actually caught that. But that's it. That's excellent. That's really cool. Can kind of get out of this probably. And this is wonderful. I think the only thing that I would have in terms of feedback is actually I will open up the video again. So yeah, that's how you do this. Downloads file. We have the links PR. And so what I'm going to do is go over to the exact moment in which I noticed him doing the drag and drop. Right there. I should pause it so it doesn't move. Cool. So what we see here is that as he's dragging and dropping, the background of this turns this dark gray color. Just for legibility reasons, you can see it's kind of black on gray here, gray on gray. We would probably just want this to be a little bit more distinguished. So this is like an amazing feature. He did an excellent job implementing this, but obviously we would want to see this get bumped up a little bit in terms of how it's actually being performed here. So what I can quickly do is take a screenshot, drag the screenshot over to Figma, and basically plop this into this little box in which I was actually going to go ahead and perform a rendering of the state that is being implied here. So I think in an ideal state, let me give myself a little bit of a white background I can work off of. There we go. So I think in an ideal state, rather than having this what's the word, like this background being displayed the way it is here, what we could do is take this form, use our lightest gray in our design system. You might not need to necessarily replace the border, but I'm doing this pretty quickly, so I just want to make this a little bit of a quick job. Actually, I should probably keep that. So this is actually going to be an interesting one where I'm going to kind of hack my way around this, where what I'm doing is making each one of these 0 opacity, kind of just simulating a bit of a state here. And then what I'm doing is setting this to being in the middle of the element. So we have now is that as someone is dragging and dropping an image, we maybe have a state that's a little bit more all-encompassing of the actual form. It's a little bit more obvious possibly for someone who is just doing this very quickly. And what you might want to point out here is drop an image here to upload. I think that's fine. Copy could probably be better, but everything can be better, probably. I might be able to, let's see. It might not be worth showing here. What I can do is, for the purposes of the issue itself, just delete some of my writing around here. So what I would do here, I have a bit of a personal style when it comes to doing these, and I like to kind of scrawl on designs. So the way in which I will approach this is I will make it relatively clear. This is the observed implementation. Make it red so it's obvious that this is a note. Observed implementation. I like to use Figma's little pencil tool quite a bit. Point out very directly what I'm addressing here. Oh shoot. I'll also make that red, maybe a little bit bolder. And then I would like to see sort of like desired change, maybe might be a way to say it. Desired change. Edit. This is a small thing. This is an amazing feature otherwise, Tyler, but I think you'll get where I'm coming at when I'm pointing at this feature. And then I'll write a small little description of the entire thing that I'm illustrating here. Instead of the dark gray background state, while drag and dropping an image. Actually, I should just make it a file into landscape. I think it would be good to light gray, our lightest gray, screen indigo, instead as a back, as an upload background. Fix this. An upload background, and provide a new label to clearly indicate the state of the. I think it's a form input. That should be fine. So let's see. That should be okay. And I'll actually make this a little more clear just so we know what this arrow is pointing to. Dark gray background and existing text, form text. Are not that legible. I think that's really all I'm saying, is that it's not legible or like a clear state that this is a change state for dragging and dropping. Like, we indicate that you can drop a file here, but it would be great if the entire state of the field basically reflected that it's accepting dragged imagery. That's it. That's all we're indicating here. So I could upload this in a clean way, but frankly, just taking a screenshot of this and using that is totally fine. What I can do is finally take this to the ticket itself. Acknowledge that he's probably watching this stream and is probably hearing everything that I'm saying. So I'll just say this is an excellent. This is looking excellent. Here's a small bit of feedback for making the drag and drop state of the field a bit more explicit. Actually, not a bit more explicit. I guess it's pretty explicit. Cool. And then I would just take that screenshot I just made and drag it and drop it into here. It should be relatively clear, but if you have any questions about the above, basically. State hyper clear. Cool. Yeah. It's a little bit of play, obviously, in how this actually ends up getting implemented. But I think that this is more or less looking good. Cool. Thanks for this this PR, Tyler, by the way. This is awesome. I'm hoping that we can get it injected into chat soon too. It'd be great to be able to drag and drop images straight into chat. That would make my meme posting that much easier. It's amazing. Let's see, any other questions? Nope, no other questions. I actually might be calling it pretty soon. I think I've given a nice bit of breadth and some actual real examples of updating, what do you call it? Updating any sort of existing issues or PRs that exist on our GitHub repository. Yeah. It's a little bit of it's a peek into a process. There's maybe some more nuance that could be risen up here in terms of exactly what you would want to write, exactly how you would want to structure feedback. But no matter the tools you have available to you, as long as you generally make things nicely labeled, use a pencil to, precisely outline what you're talking about, you redline it, as we say in the design world, and just make sure that you're being very explicit in the states that you're trying to offer up in any sort of given feedback. Usually, I will say that anything of that nature in terms of QA or issue raising will be massively appreciated, certainly by me. But Matilda and everyone else working on the team, I think, would love any help in this realm. If there are any last-minute questions, please feel free to ask. But I think I'll be signing off in just a minute. I think I'll transition the screen over to my farewell clock, and just let the music play out. But I'll be making an appearance in chat. So for anyone who has questions, just continue to ask them there. This has been fun. I'm a little bit hoarse, but I'd like to basically be doing a lot more of this sort of live QA process, a lot more in the future, without all the prelude. We can get straight to it and just go into landscape and sort of pick it apart, apply a scalpel to it, and get everything into nice working order for OTAs in the future. All right. Peace, everyone.